Evening, everyone. Welcome to the Hingham School Committee meeting, Hingham School Committee meeting of December. Oh.
Hold on. This one. Bring this one up this way.
Oh.
And you guys can share that one.
Oh. It's on. All right. Sorry. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the special Hingham School Committee meeting of December 10th. We are here tonight to interview two of our finalist candidates for the position of Hingham Superintendent of Schools. Please note that tonight's forum is being recorded by Harbor Media and will be broadcast after December 17th. So thank you all for joining us tonight for the superintendent candidate interviews. The school committee has invited and encouraged community participation throughout this process, and we sincerely appreciate your engagement to date, and we look forward to it in the coming weeks. I'm quickly just going to frame tonight's discussion, and then we'll move on to interview, as I'm sure the candidate is eager and very far away. Sorry. The interview should last about 90 minutes. Each school committee member has prepared questions to ask of the candidates, covering specific themes that are important to the community that we determined through the candidate profiles that we developed. We will open the session with our questions. They should take about 75 minutes, and then there will be time for questions from the public. If you do wish to ask a question, please step up to the mic and you'll be recognized. I do want to note, however, that this is while it's a formal interview, it will also be conversational in nature, so I can't guarantee that we will wrap up within 70 to 75 minutes. We do have a limited 90-minute time for the candidate, so we will get to as many questions as we can, but we are going to endeavor to make sure we have time for plenty of comments and questions from the public. The candidates have had a very long day. They arrived at Hingham High School this morning early, met with central office staff, proceeded to each of the buildings while being escorted by school committee members. They have had questions and answers with faculty and staff and leadership. So it's been a very long day for them. And now to top it all off, they're here tonight for a public interview, live, being recorded. So there's a little bit of pressure on everyone. So let's just all take a deep breath, including the public, and we can move on to the interview. I'll start with the first question for Dr. LaBillois. Dr. LaBillois, this is your third school year working alongside Dr. Gallo, and so you've had a front row seat for the 3 school years to learn all you can from Dr. Gallo on managing a school district. So in just a minute or two, can you tell us one thing that you've learned from Dr. Gallo that you would continue doing, and perhaps one thing that you would do a little differently?
Sure. First, thanks for having me. It has been a long day, as Michelle mentioned, but also a really wonderful opportunity to sort of set my phone on airplane mode and visit the schools and actually engage with the faculty, staff, and students in a way that I don't typically get to. So I do appreciate the opportunity to be here in front of you this evening and the opportunity to have got to meet our faculty and chat with them in a way that I don't typically get to do. Dr. Gallo has been a huge resource and support to me both professionally and personally since I began my time here in the district. If I think critically about what I'd like to continue is Dr. Gallo has over time established sort of strong partnerships with school-based organizations like the monthly all-town PTO board. She meets regularly with students. She has a teacher advisory. So I'd like to maintain those components, right, to make sure that I have a student advisory, a faculty advisory, a PTO sort of executive board of the executive board. I think those were really helpful tools to get to know the feedback and sort of what is going on in the community that needs sort of thoughtful discourse and dialogue. One of the things that I think I would think about a little differently, and I think we already have begun to, is in an attempt to engage the community in a new way, she began a series of superintendent spotlights where she would film with Harbor Media and sort of highlight different features of the district And I think that's something I'd like to sort of rethink. I'd like to have that programming be focused on student achievement, student programs, and have the students themselves, their voices, as well as the voices of our faculty, really shine through that programming. And we're about to initiate something very similar to that model through our partnership with Harvard Media this year, where we're going to be highlighting over a 13-episode series our new social and emotional learning program. So thinking about community engagement in new ways is something I'd like to reconsider, something that she would have done and has done well. But I think, as I think to the future, I'd like to see that evolve a little bit.
Thank you. The next question will come from Carlos De Silva.
Good evening, Jamie.
Good evening, Carlos.
And thank you all for taking this precious time to be here with us. We really appreciate it. Jamie, as you know, we have over 650 employees. Most of them are represented by 6 unions combined. Tell us about your experiences with collective bargaining. Mm-hmm. Then, please describe how you view the role of the school committee in the various stages of the collective bargaining process.
Okay. So I have had the opportunity, while not independently leading collective bargaining, I was a part of the Hingham team, the school committee's team that negotiated the last contract with our teachers, our paraeducators. So I have experience in that way, sort of identifying those pieces of the contract that need clarity, or examining sort of recent law that has been passed to identify those pieces that we need to sort of incorporate in the next round. In Norwell, I was in charge of the labor management team that actually wrote the language relative to educator evaluation. As you know, Massachusetts, the Commonwealth several years ago rolled out a new revised educator evaluation model, and I worked hand in hand with the Norwell Education Association to actually figure out what the actual language in our contract would be. But beyond those sort of more formal experiences, I've also had the opportunity through my time here in the district to then manage the day-to-day interpretation and understanding of the collective bargaining agreement as it actually plays itself out in the day-to-day operations of the district. When I think about the role of the committee, the role of the committee is really to work collaboratively with the administration to get a sense from the people who actually implement your contract, what are those pieces that need additional clarification or need support in making sure that the spirit and the intent of the agreement is actualized in day-to-day operations. And I think it is your agreement with the associations. I think the role, and of course, in that we would want to be respectful of any priorities or initiatives the committee would like to see us undertake with our association. But I would also hope that we would have an open, honest, reciprocal relationship where we could share ideas, concerns, or thoughts before heading into the formal negotiation sessions.
Great. Thank you. Libby, you have the next question?
Hi.
Hey, Livy.
Ideally, how should technology be used in a school system, and how should it be integrated into teaching and learning?
So I believe technology should serve a function. So it shouldn't be there just because it's what everyone's using at home or it's the latest and greatest gadget or fad. It really should serve a purpose that supports our students in demonstrating their knowledge in new and creative ways. I think if we think critically about the work that we've undertaken the last several years here in the district to roll out the 2016 Digital Literacy and Computer Science Framework, that's a really great illustrative example of us taking a really thoughtful, innovative approach to the integration of technology learning and learning outcomes through an immersive educational environment. We also have an understanding that kids don't learn in isolation. And so, again, technology should really be the vehicle by which we encourage, support, and enrich student learning, but also give them avenues by which they can demonstrate their knowledge in sort of new innovative ways. The world in which they will live as adults is very different than the world we live in now, and it's different than the world that we grew up in. And I think part of the role that technology needs to play, and that we need to play for our students, is to provide them an academic preparation for a future that we don't quite know what it's going to be. And what we do know is technology is here to stay. And so by taking the approach of giving our kids the skills and knowledge necessary to understand how that technology works and how it can be used to manipulate to manipulate their ability to control and understand that technology. What I mean is what we want to be thoughtful of is producing students who are producers of technology and not just consumers of technology. I think that also goes a long way to address concerns we've heard relative to screen time and the amount of time that kids are spending on screens being passive participants in something. By the work that we're doing is we're trying to enable our students to have a really strong understanding of how that technology works. When you push the power button on the computer and it lights up, it's not magic, right? It's actual algorithms and it's actually mathematics come to life, right? And to the extent that we can help kids understand how it operates and then give them the skills necessary to manipulate that, the goal would be to sort of really have producers of technology rather than consumers. And its place in teaching and learning is really relative to the demonstration of what they know in innovative and articulate ways, and also serves as a vehicle to find information that may otherwise not have been accessible to them.
My question is concerning special education. In your view, what role do general education teachers play in the education of students with disabilities and in the implementation of IEP services? Can you give us examples of ways you have supported general education teachers in your district to ensure that they're able to effectively educate all students, including those with disabilities?
Yeah, I think they play a critical role. I always get nervous when we begin to create false dichotomies with these labels of regular or special ed. The reality is they are all of our students. Some require a little bit less in terms of meeting the expectations, some require a little bit more. And so I think that the role of the regular ed teacher is to sort of support and find opportunities for all of the learners in their classrooms to find success in our rigorous program. It is no secret that we are a high-achieving school district with kids who do well in post-secondary study. We have a high proportion of our students who go on to post-secondary courses of study, and not all of those kids have learned in traditional ways, right? And so the role of the regular ed teacher is to provide access to the content. And I think when we think about what a special education teacher brings to the table is they bring a really solid understanding of teaching practices and methodologies, where the regular ed teachers really bring a really strong understanding of content and sort of standards and outcome. And so I think by having sort of collaborative relationships between those two, outcomes for kids just really improve beyond expectation as otherwise conceptualized. The work that I've done with regular education teachers is to support their skills relative to differentiated instruction, their ability to have a process and a procedure that helps them navigate a rather complex and lengthy process, to make it more student-focused and student-centered, and also to empower them to get creative, to think outside the box, to not get mired down in what we've always done, and be really thoughtful and forward-thinking into what we could do to produce even higher levels of achievement for all of our students. But my background and my training is in diversity, in sort of variation amongst sort of what is typical. And so I really, I think on a lot of levels, we're often judged not by how our best students perform, but how our students most at risk perform. And so when we think critically about our achievement gaps here in the district, we can do more, and we will be doing more with our new Director of Student Services on board. And the goal is to really present a unified front that we're all in this together, because the student has a disability doesn't make him any less of a student of that regular ed classroom teacher, right? Everybody, we have a shared ownership over having all kids find success.
Ed, I believe you have the next question.
Dr. Jamie, good evening.
Good evening, Ed. Nice to see you.
How would you lead towards excellence excellence in the aspect of systems operation as it applies towards fields, grounds, and maintenance?
I would ensure, so that is not an area of my expertise or one that I've had a lot of experience with, but what I would rely on are the people who we employ, who that becomes their role. I would want to engage the managers and sort of the leaders in those departments toward a process of being thoughtful reflection to find efficiencies, to find opportunities to clarify. There can be some confusion relative to rental fees and use of the fields and sound systems related there too, right? So there are some real practical sort of policy level concerns that come out of that management that I want to have a better understanding of. But in terms of sort of maintenance and ongoing upkeep and sort of repair, I would be hopeful that we would have a sort of a management operations team that also has a strategic plan and has sort of a multi-year forward-thinking plan that actually schedules projects that we know are coming or issues that we know we have to be thoughtful of, and sort of in order to give the committee a good sense of what our needs will be in terms of financial impact or additional funding resources that we'll need in the longer term. I think that it helps better plan. So while in my role as a superintendent, I'm ultimately responsible for the operation of the district, but I do recognize that I would be hopeful that my management team would sort of support me in those areas where I do not have a lot of experience or background, and frankly, facilities and field use would be one of those areas.
Thank you. Good, Ed? Good? Sure.
You visited our Foster Elementary School, which needs to be renovated or replaced. Any experience in this area, and how would you help?
With a building that may need to be replaced or rebuilt? I wasn't understanding the question. What was my experience with a building that might need to be replaced or rebuilt?
Exactly.
Okay. So I've not had that experience. So I have had when I walked into Norwell, they had just finished a multi-million-dollar, multi-year strategic plan that actually brought all of their facilities up to date. Since I've been here in Hingham, I have been involved with the Foster physical plant and building the case for the MSB application, and so I'm not familiar with any building other than Foster, actually, which is the one that's sort of up for focus for us. I would be thoughtful, so depending on the outcome of the MSBA decision, I think that would be an opportunity for conversation with the committee to talk about what is its next steps. And sort of, I certainly would bring an opinion to the table, I'd bring a point of view to the table. The reality is, we cannot continue to expect academic excellence in a failing infrastructure. And whether that comes now or comes in 2 years, the reality is that Foster does need to be addressed. We have some the impact of the physical plant on teaching and learning really cannot continue. It is having it's not the best environment with severe temperature swings, and the reality is the students, the children of this community deserve a better facility. And so depending on the outcome of MSBA, the conversation will then need to become, where do we go now? Do we go to loan? Do we talk to the town about available resources? Do we talk about capital improvements, or begin to sort of fix what we know is broken? Because there have been, while we've maintained the upkeep and we've maintained the building's operational, its ability to be operational, we do have we've been sort of longer term projects have been put on hold waiting to find out what the outcome at MSBA will be. And so if the outcome is no, then we're going to have to go back to the drawing board, which will then impact other priorities, right? Other asks of the community, other asks of the town. And I think we need to be thoughtful that if it doesn't pass, that we have sort of discussions relative to what comes next. We've built the conversation with the community where they now are at a place where they also understand that we need to do something about Foster Elementary, right? So I think the other risk that we run by not addressing it is you can't tell us there's been a problem and then have the funding source go away and then walk away from it, right? So we're going to have to sort of come up collectively with what will be next. But apart from Other districts, I've not had that experience. My experience has been with Foster.
To pivot a little bit, because since we're speaking about resources, I think Liza had some budget questions for you.
Hi. Can you explain the process you will use in developing a school system budget? Oh, sorry, I'll start again. Please explain the process you will use in developing a school system budget and how you go about selling your proposed budget to the school committee and the community. And then as follow-up, how do you define and justify wants and needs when available dollars cannot cover all requests?
Great. Well, first of all, it's the school committee's budget, right? So I would hope that we would begin with a process by which we work with the committee to determine from them their areas of priority, the areas that they feel that they would like to address in the upcoming budget cycle. We will certainly come to you with an administrative recommendation of what improvements we need relative to programming, what resources we may need. But the reality is I'm selling your budget, right? So that's I will manage it, I will implement it, I will ensure it's effective and honest implementation oversight. But when it comes down to building sort of more forward-thinking ideas or areas that we want to address more globally, I think I would rely on your feedback as well. We'll certainly, again, bring what we need to run the district with the program we have. When we begin to think about new initiatives, for example, I know there's been discussion relative to human resource director, right? So then if that's a priority of the committee, and we would support that sort of area as an area of priority, we would have to be thoughtful about asks that were wants, right, relative to whether that fits in the priority for this year, which is why I really do believe that we do need a multi-year comprehensive strategic plan that the committee would then adopt as a matter of policy, which will then make those annual discussions of what the priority be a little more succinct, because we would have had adopted by policy a strategic plan that lays out our strategic objectives over the next 5 to 7 years, right? So that the emphasis and the work can be on how do we best find funding sources, how do we work collaboratively with the town to get the budget passed and get it funded, and not spend so much time worrying about what are we going to do this year, right? I think we it's like Groundhog Day in some way, that we have the same conversation every year, and some people feel that the initiative I've been talking about or the area I want to address has been unaddressed for multiple years, and when is it going to be my turn? And I think what I would like to do is sort of work more collaboratively at the outset to develop a multi-year strategic plan that then becomes the committee's priority over the next 5 to 7 years. And it also insulates us to sort of turnover in the committee, right? So as time comes and goes and new committees form and come in with the new points of view and new areas for priority, that would be the guiding document, right, that the committee would use as its foundational source. So again, I would expect there to be some collaboration to find out what your resources are. I would have gone through a process with the leadership team of identifying what do we need to honor the collective bargaining agreement, what do we need relative to our curriculum and to our programming, what are those annual ongoing costs that we have to address. From there, it can become, so what are your new requests? And then working to really dial down with them which of those are wants versus needs. And if they can articulate that we're not meeting students' needs, if there's something more there other than, well, it'd be great if we did X, the reality is it would be great, but we also have to address the needs of our students first. And so that would be sort of my priority or my decision-making sort of way of thinking around what would be a want or a need. If it directly addresses a need that we're not serving or that we need to address for kids, that takes precedent over something that would be great if we just did this, right? And so I would want to have that lens. And then so once that work gets done, I would then come to the committee with, here's the administrative recommendation, having worked with you on your priorities, and then begin to socialize and work with the town to get a sense of to what extent are we thinking, what is the forecast they look like? What are we looking at in terms of revenue? The reality when it comes to the budget is, and I would agree with Dr. Gallo's assessment on this, is we are given our fair share of the pot of money, right, that the town takes in. The challenge we have before us is that pot of money needs to get bigger. right? And that is where our collective energy really should go, is to advocating for additional state funding, additional local funding. That's where it needs to go, because we also cannot destroy relationships, or we want to maintain good working relationships with our town counterparts, because ultimately we're all on the same team, right? We all have the same focus, is to present the best services possible for the community of Hingham. Our priority, of course, is to the children of the community and providing that they have the best. But I think that's sort of, in my mind, how I would see a process running for the budget development.
Great, thank you. Want to go, Kay?
Good evening, Jamie.
Evening, Kay.
Happy to be here tonight.
Nice to see you.
So my topic is communication. Describe the various ways you would communicate as the superintendent to the school committee, staff, parents, students, and community. Give examples of the types of media you use and the tone, style, or manner you try to express.
Sure. I use a variety. I would hope to use, as a superintendent, a variety of ways, right, to communicate with the public. And I think I would utilize different avenues for different messages, right? So I worked along with UK actually to manage the district's Facebook page, which didn't exist prior to my arrival. We use that as a real vehicle to showcase student work, to showcase some really great things that we're doing in the schools, to showcase the wonderful work that our students are producing. But I wouldn't necessarily use that as the means to communicate, for example, our social emotional work. I might use it there as a brief snippet to give updates, but we instituted the Dear Community letters, where we sort of wrote to our community to articulate to them why we're doing the work we're doing and why something might be a priority. I would also be thoughtful of our website, our web presence, which we've been working on to sort of, the look, the ease of use, the accessibility of the website is something we want to be thoughtful of. I'm also thoughtful of in-person conversations, right? Being present at PTOs. When we were launching our social emotional initiative, I had an opportunity to go and actually meet with the clergy in town, right? To speak to them about the work that we're doing and the way in which they can support that work, the way they can encourage the completion of those surveys that we were doing. We also, spend some time with town department heads, right? To meet students where they're at, to actually go out to the schools. I moderate the Hingham Education Foundation second grade spelling bee. Just on yesterday morning, I was the Santa Claus, let me rephrase. I participated in the magic that is Christmas at the community center for the community breakfast, right? So being able to get out, I'm just thoughtful if any children watch this video later. I don't want to destroy the magic of Christmas, but that I was one of Santa's elves, right? That was there at the community center with our students that, they told me what grade they were in and how much they loved learning and what their favorite things were to do. So to be present, to be available at homecoming games or athletic events, or I was here watching the school musicals and listening and communicating the work that we're doing in multiple venues. The other thing that I thought that thought about a little differently is when we did launch our social emotional work, we also launched a program called Parent Ambassadors, where we actually brought people from the community in to us who were interested and had a level of interest in the work that we were doing, for example, with social emotional work, who then learned in great detail the work we were doing, why we were doing it, the data that led us to those decisions, so that they can then go out into the community and dispel myths, who could be out at soccer fields or at play practices or at drop-offs and pickups, so that they heard someone talking. They actually were armed with the right information of what we were doing. I do struggle with the broad use of the term communication in the sense of what people really want to know is timely information, right? And it could be about it could be about something big or it could be about something small. And so messages through Aspen and X2. Like, there's lots of ways to sort of communicate. I would hope that I found a variety of venues that serve different purposes and actually reach different audiences. One of the pieces of feedback we get, for example, is, we got the email, but I didn't really read it, right? So that I'm wondering if that makes the most sense. I mean, do we want to go to Twitter where it's 120 characters? I don't know that that's the best way to deliver information about our computer science initiative, for example, right? So I would like to see a variety of ways that we communicate, both using social media and traditional means, but also be thoughtful that the venue and the pathway connect with the audience we're trying to reach.
question. Other than the regular communications, which we just spoke about, what do you think is critical to communicate at a time of crisis?
When crises present themselves, first and foremost, community and parents want to know that their children are safe, right? So I would immediately be thoughtful of giving people a sense of what the status of the situation is. I would provide as much information as possible. What becomes challenging there is it's not uncommon for people to want information that we simply cannot give. That can be frustrating. That can be that can be disappointing. We can not meet people's expectations with what they wanted to know. But we are, the role of the superintendent is really the steward of the organization, right? You have to serve with a level of humility that there were people long ahead of you, and there will be people long after you, right? And that while you're here, you want to ensure that you communicate as effectively and clearly as possible that student safety, that people's ability to send us their children and know that they're safe, is, particularly in the times in which we live, is paramount important, right? It's of the most, it is a paramount concern. And so I would start with letting people know that the students are safe and here is what's happening. And I would be thoughtful of ongoing communication throughout that crisis as I'm available. And if I can't be available, I want to be thoughtful that we have sort of a structure in place of who I will be the one who communicates, but it could be that the assistant superintendent or the director of student services or the director of business and support services pushes the button on send because I'm actively engaged over here with the actual situation. Does that make sense? So I would be thoughtful about timely, ongoing communication, starting with everybody's safe. Here's what we know, and as we learn more, share that as we learn more. And it's been my experience that people generally are receptive to as much information as you can give, and it's when we give enough that it gets a little confusing, right, that people get frustrated. So we want to be thoughtful that the information we give doesn't confuse the matter more or add a level of complication that we weren't anticipating. Because sometimes in an effort to be respectful of everyone's privacy, we can make some statements that we understand on the inside, but from an outsider's point of view, make absolutely no sense and have actually have them more worried than if we had just said, everything's fine and I can't tell you more right now, right? So that's how I would think about communicating in a time of a crisis.
Thank you. Carrie, you had another. Do you want to?
So this question is about curriculum. Can you give us an example of an innovative curriculum initiative that you have directed? And could you also give us an example of a program that was not successful and describe the course of action you took as a result?
Relative to, so I think the way that we have approached here in Hingham our approach to the digital literacy and computer science standards, I think is a really great example. Another great example, which I've talked a little bit about, so maybe I'll spend some time talking about our social and emotional learning initiative, particularly engaged K-6, K-5. We began, when I came on board here, the communication I received was that social and emotional learning, the focus on the whole child was something that I was sort of tasked and hopeful that I would sort of take a leadership role in. We began by first surveying our parents and community, our faculty, and our students to find out what are those things our students are struggling with. From there, we then unpacked that data and began researching effective programs that we felt would meet the need that we have here in Hingham. And that's where we landed on the toolbox. And I think we launched that just this fall. Now, while it does take some time to do sort of a critical analysis of curriculum implementation and effectiveness, what I can say is I have not experienced a rollout that has been as positive in my 13 years of administration. The faculty have taken to it. I've heard someone today literally say it's the gift that just keeps on giving this year. It was a gift to us. It really has done wonders for developing sort of self-regulation abilities in our students. To know that, you know, I cannot make life easy. None of us can do that. Life is challenging, life is messy, life is hard. That is what, therein lies the beauty of what it is to live a life, right, well lived. What I can do, though, is give our kids the tools and knowledge necessary so that when life gets difficult, they don't fall apart, right? That they actually have some skills to fall on. So I think our implementation, particularly at the elementary level of our social emotional learning program, has been a real triumph, I think. And I think that in the years to come, we'll see that pay dividends in their ability to be effective communicators, to be effective partners, to be effective sons and daughters. I think it's really going to be a great addition to the community. A curriculum initiative that didn't go as well, what I would argue in Norwell, we had just, as I was departing to sort of come here, we had just realigned our mathematics program, and we sort of identified through, you know, our teachers really worked hard to unpack and pilot and look at different programs, and the program we looked at, Envision Math by Pearson, was a real departure from everyday math. So we had been an everyday math district just like Hingham in the mathematics program for a number of years, and I think when we made that departure, we did not give as much thought to the level of support and professional development that would be needed for our faculty to then implement that. And so just as I was leaving, we were beginning to rethink the model of support structure for academic performance at elementary. We moved away from a tutor model and a paraeducator model and began to look more at a specialist model. That model has worked well, but the actual curriculum that they were working with has been less successful. And that's really been through feedback as I've left, that you know, we with my departure and sort of transitions in leadership and sort of that focus on teaching and learning mathematics at elementary really wasn't as big of a focus as it could have been. And in turn, they're now beginning to scrap that and begin to look at centers-based units that are based more on sort of activities rather than a package program.
Liza, did you have another question?
Can you share with us, what does an ideal superintendent and school committee relationship look like?
I think it's one of mutual respect and understanding. I think my role as superintendent is to understand you are the elected officials of the community. You are my evaluators. I work collaboratively with you to develop the budget, to sort of hear your priorities relative to your budget, to be thoughtful about implementation and passage of that budget, and also to be thoughtful and support your work relative to policy implementation. I think, but at the same token, you would also be respectful that my job is to run the school district, and that the boundaries are respected and encouraged, really. It's healthy to have disagreement and active discussion and sort of back and forth around operational issues, but at the end of the day, that falls squarely in the superintendent's purview, where issues relative to policy and budget and evaluation are squarely in the committee's purview. And I would hope that we had a healthy respect for the work that we do. I think we work so closely that everyone understands everybody else's role. And I think sometimes in an effort to be supportive or to be helpful, we might inadvertently cross boundaries, right? And I think that happens on both sides. And again, it's not coming from a place of wanting to be difficult or mean or nasty. It's really, everyone really does have the best of intentions, or at least that's how I approach it, right? I have to believe that everyone has the best intention. So I think a healthy relationship is one where we understand and respect each other's strengths and limitations, and also understand where the boundaries lie relative to each other's roles.
Sorry. I've got one for you, Jamie. So, other than going to the preschool and reading to the students,
yeah.
which is the best part of our day today, but on a daily, on an average day in the life of an assistant superintendent or a superintendent, what's the best part of the day? What excites you the most when you get to the office?
Hearing from teachers that something that we've worked on together, something that we've implemented, something that we've been talking about for a while and has come to fruition is effective. That's really exciting. I do try to the extent possible, and I would really hope to try as a superintendent as well, to be really visible and present in the school buildings, because the children are a phenomenal reminder of why we're here. They are the sole purpose for our existence, is the children of this community. And to the extent that we're visible, we're present with them. My favorite piece, for example, I was talking with some kids earlier in one of the elementary schools, and they said, "Oh, what are you doing here? You're coming down to see us?" Because I usually go pop in and say hi to this particular class. And I said, "No, I'm on an interview, and I'm a little nervous, and I'm applying to be the superintendent. I'm here for an interview." And one of the little kids said to me, "Just use your breathing tool and you'll be fine," which is the social emotional program that we've just implementing right throughout the elementary school. So that right there made the whole day worth it, right? To be out in the mix with them, to sort of see them using those things that we knew were important, but yet I was able to, through consensus building and through teamwork, bring that to them and have them benefit from that is incredibly profound. And I will take all the other parts that go along with the role, including the ultimate responsibility and making mistakes. Listen, I will be a new superintendent, right? I will make mistakes. What I can't guarantee I won't, because in fact I know I will. What I can say is that it will always come from a place of good intent for those children. All of my decisions are focused on their well-being, their safety, their psychological safety, their academic performance and achievement, and having all of our kids find a place where they're accepted and valued for who they are as human beings.
Yeah, I'm going to let you put the bad parts of the day in the garbage can and move on to Carrie.
I have another question about curriculum. How do you view the roles of the superintendent, the faculty, and the school committee in curriculum development and/or innovation? And how have you responded to community pressure on curriculum?
Could you just repeat that one more time? Sorry.
Sure. How do you view the roles of the superintendent, the faculty, and the school committee in curriculum development and/or innovation? And how have you responded to community pressure on curriculum?
So here in Hingham, we actually have a fairly unique structure relative to curriculum and instruction, where we have full-time content directors whose role and responsibility is the oversight and support of teaching and learning throughout the 5 major content areas. So I would be thoughtful that as a superintendent, my direct supervision to them is focused on methodology from which I would like them to proceed for structuring curriculum mapping and beginning to work on expectations for benchmarking and sort of figuring out where our students need to be. That's something that work started when I arrived. That was an area of focus that my predecessor, Ellen Keene, and I had talked about upon my entry, of sort of when I begin to think about working with this group of leaders, where do I go with them? Where do I begin? And she articulated the need for curriculum maps, that as we experience turnover in faculty, that we do have a fairly comprehensive mapped out scope and sequence to the teaching and learning arc of any school year across departments. The role of the school committee, I don't see playing a role in the implementation of curriculum. Where I see you play the role is relative to the support of accountability, right? So the expectation, for example, in the department reviews should be on, here's the goals we set for this department 3 years ago, and now here we are 4 years later, and here's where we are with those goals. Does that make sense? So I think that's where I would see the input of the committee. And the faculty, my expectation would have their sleeves rolled up and engaged from day to day with the implementation and actualization of that curriculum. Relative to community pressure, the process by which I would expect that we evaluate the effectiveness of any potential programs and look at the evidence base surrounding those practices or that methodology, I think should speak for itself relative to community pressure. So I can understand, I've not had the experience, to be honest, of community pressure relative to curriculum. But I would imagine that if I did, I would be thoughtful of, here is the research that we did, prior to making the selection that we did, here's the data we looked at. I would hope that it would be as black and white as possible. And when, again, whatever decision we made or whatever way we went with curriculum would have a grounding in an evidence base that suggests that what we're doing is actually working. In this day and age of research, with our access to major research universities just up the road in Boston, it's almost inexcusable that we're not being more thoughtful about, so tell me why this works and show me how it does. And I think that's also where the committee can play a role, is in the accountability on that curriculum rather than on implementation and selection.
Thank you. Carlos, did you have another question?
Dr. LaBillois, how do you collaborate with teachers? How do you deal with them when they express views you oppose?
So all of the work that we have done relative to social emotional learning, relative to, for example, professional development, the shifts and the changes that we have made have been through what I like to think was collaboration and consensus building. The teachers were in lockstep with us. I think what I often struggle with is other people's perceptions of me, right, versus reality. I'm still new to the faculty. I've been here 2.5 years, but it's really only been 2.5 years. And while I've gotten to know some well, I've not had an opportunity to get to know others as well. So I do listen to the feedback, and I often will take it as critical feedback that I need to improve because somehow my messaging is being misinterpreted. Anyone who knows me, who works with me, I think would be surprised to hear that I'm a unilateral decision maker who just comes around and says, you're going to do this and do that. However, some people have that impression of me. That has been the feedback that I've been given and that I've actually solicited from people. I rely on people who are going to be honest, who are going to provide thoughtful feedback that actually helps me improve. Because if I've somehow misinterpreted or somehow misjudged the kind of information I need to give or the rationale that I need to provide so people understand where the decision is coming from, then that's actually very helpful feedback. I actually like people and encourage people who disagree with me. I think it makes our argument stronger. It actually helps me better understand where all of those perceptions could come from later. I'd rather hear it from the staff and the faculty before hearing it from the community on a much more broader public stage, right? And so I think what it comes down to is the relationship that you want to have with the faculty. And for me, it's one of thoughtful, honest feedback. And there are people who, regardless of how nice I am or how much I go out and say hi and I'm available, who the role that I play, regardless of the human being that I am, overshadows that. And there's a level of fear and intimidation, which I sort of don't actively encourage or sort of understand where it comes from, but hearing it is helpful feedback, right? That just means I need to be out more and more available so they get to know me. By and large, the faculty have been incredibly receptive and welcoming, and as I go through this process, have been incredibly supportive, and a lot of well wishes, right? So I don't want anyone to feel or give the impression that I don't have a good working relationship with the faculty. That's not accurate. What I will say is I do actively listen for those times when that's not the perception to better understand how to communicate more effectively.
Thank you. Did you have a professional development question you want to ask?
So, Dr. Jamie, you have made significant changes to the professional development offered to the Hingham staff. Can you please share with us if you could continuous improvement on that? What an ideal professional development would look like across...
I'm so sorry.
Oh, can you all hear me? Or should I repeat? Okay, sorry about that. You have made significant changes to the professional development program offered to the Hingham staff. Could you please share with us what your ideal professional development program would look like across the district, and please be specific about the elements and any challenges that you might face in putting that in place?
If I could wave a wand, the professional development. So just so the people at home that are listening and the committee fully understands, because I know some of you are newer to the committee and maybe not been there when that work was done. We assembled a team of over 30 educators from all different roles and levels in the district to talk critically about professional development. And we conducted both a professional practice survey to get a baseline understanding of where the professional practice is relative to the teaching standards, but also what professional development or professional learning opportunities would they most like to engage in. We took that information and then really overhauled the model. We introduced additional release days. We introduced a uniform time of release to make the professional development offerings more efficient for our educators, and I'll introduce the concept of choice. So over the course of the school year, our educators are engaged in both choice-based offerings that meet for 3 afternoons throughout the year, and that can be on any range of topics from computer science and digital literacy to service-based learning and how to incorporate community-based projects into your classroom. That's one running this year on service learning, how to get out in the community and actually build a service learning project. And that has really engaged our educators in new ways. The feedback, for example, we were over today watching the Makerspace at East Elementary, and Greg Bliss, one of the teachers there, came over to me and said, this idea came from the professional development you sent us to the Leslie's STEAM lab. And so once we saw what we could do, we came back and implemented it here. If I could think, so that's the work that was done sort of leading up to the question, that we really revamped that model, introduced the concept of educator choice, and now our teachers engage in roughly half of their time in school-based or district-determined PD, but they also have a balance of interest-based PD that they can take on anything they want to take it on. That improves and grows their own professional practice. When I think about what an ideal model of professional development would be, it would be a model that we're actually seeing implement through our computer science innovation fellows, our HEF innovation fellows, where they receive ongoing direct instruction and training in new methodologies and models, but then also receive ongoing coaching and support throughout the school year that's embedded in the classrooms. I think one of the things that we need to be thoughtful of is somehow, how do we bridge the gap? And I think this would be a challenge of how do you bridge the gap from a standalone professional development session on topic A and have it become more a part of your ongoing practice day-to-day in the classroom. And in the absence of coaching or some kind of a level of support for that actually help them implement, I don't know that we can actually achieve that goal, which would be a challenge, right? So we know what good PD is, we know how it's structured. It is timely, it is efficient, it is in vivo, which means that as the issue comes up, you get the coach or the support of somebody right there in the moment to help you process through those decision-making, those decisions that you have to make. The model that we currently have has them together in November, has them together in January, and has them together again in March. And so we don't really have, while it's a great change and it's a great move in the right direction, it's not as ideal as it could be. And I think the missing link to make it more ideal would be the ongoing coaching and support of our teachers day to day.
Great. Any other questions from the committee? Carrie, sure.
Okay, just one more on special education. Special education is a particular challenge because of the complexity of the laws, student needs, and parent concerns. What have you done to make your special education department work better in either Hingham or Norwell, while balancing the needs of the students with the fiscal responsibility to the school department? And additionally, what criteria do you use to assess the effectiveness of your special education programs?
So to the first point, I served as the Director of Student Services for the Norwell Public Schools for 4 years. And in that role, oversaw the redesign and restructuring of our entire special education program. We saw increased staffing levels. We saw a decrease in the overall eligibility numbers, but that really was a function of making our educators better at their assessment techniques, and also being better able to identify those students who had made enough progress that they were no longer eligible and had actually made progress commensurate with their peers and they were no longer eligible, right? So it was a function of really rethinking and going back to process. I can never guarantee outcome. What I can guarantee is process. And so I think it's incredibly important that our focus, particularly in special education, is on process, procedure, and structure around which we measure our goals. When we talk about what is a measurement of success, while I really would like to see higher levels of achievement relative to MCAS and accountability rating. I'm also thoughtful that the true testament of progress relative to that population is progress toward their goals. The extent to which those goals were written in a measurable format that provided access, and the extent to which the students have mastered and met those goals, I think is going to be critically important. I think part of the organizational need that has to happen here is we do need to have some thoughtful discourse and conversation about how to better structure the Student Services Office. While it's called the Office of Student Services, it is essentially the Office of Special Education. When our student population grew to be over 4,000, state regulation mandates that we have a full-time dedicated administrator of special education. So what happened is, as the Hingham population grew and that model evolved, this year, as we brought on a new director, things like civil rights oversight and management, things like English language learners and Section 504, over time got sort of divvied out to other people in other departments. And for example, my office, I oversee not only civil rights and the annual sign-offs of our faculty and staff, but also the ELL program. When we think about what student services is designed to be, is it should be a full suite of student services. I think what I've observed so far in my time here is the district is almost too big to have the structure, the administrative structure, at least in the central office, that we have in place. And so I would be hopeful that we could, in terms of my role as the superintendent in guiding and growing the student services department, would be organizationally be thoughtful about its structure and the way it's managed and operated, so that it can be more effectively, it could have the ability to be more effective in its timely and ongoing communication with families. And also monitor student progress. We have one director who's responsible for implementing all hundreds of IEPs across the district to ensure compliance, who also has to solve and settle disputes, but also has to give vision, direction, and a future-oriented leadership style to the department. And that's an awful lot to ask of one person. So I think what I've experienced, at least through my time here, is we do need to be thoughtful about its organization and its structure, which I think has led to, over time, some of the breakdowns in communication in the community.
Anyone else have one? So I'll ask the last, and then we can open it up to questions from the public. So I guess my last question would be, what would you envision your first 3 to 6 months, if named superintendent, what would you envision those to look like, and what could the staff and the community expect from those first several months on the job?
Mm-hmm. I mean, the reality is I would want to spend that time getting to know people, getting to understand the needs of various constituent groups. I would want to be available and out in the community for people to, both formal and informal ways, to be available for questions, for feedback. I would want to host a series of sort of listening sessions, partner with the PTOs to sort of be a part of their meetings, to sort of get a sense from the this is a great opportunity, right? This is the first time in a number of years where we are going to have sort of a new leader for the district. And I think that opportunity and the potential is profound to have this transition be really a benefit. While we will mourn sort of the evolution of Dr. Gallo's career to a new phase of her life and retirement, I think we also it's a time to look forward, to be thoughtful about what's to come. I would want to get a sense of what the needs are and what the issues are in the community. While I do have a sense from my role as the assistant superintendent, I have not gotten that information in the role of the superintendent, right? So while I feel like I have a good sense of where the comments and the feedback and the conversation may go, I would want to take the opportunity in the first 3 to 6 months to really begin to hear that for myself, to be present so people can begin to identify their role with the person. I think we're at a stage now culturally in the community where you just say dot and everybody is, there's a natural association, right, to the school department, to the role of superintendent, and I would like to eventually get to a place where you can say Dr. Jamie and they would do the same thing. And so I think that's going to take time, listening, to be available, and really to come in and take stock of what is and be thoughtful of where we want to go next.
Great. Thank you. All right. Seeing no other questions from the committee members, is there anyone from the audience who would like to ask a question? If so, if you could just come up to the microphone and state your name and ask your question directed to Dr. LaBillois. Okay. I was going to say, because we can come up with more questions if you want to hear more from us, but.
Hi.
Just your name. That would be great. Thank you, Tim.
My kids are at East. Wanted to ask a question about some program development. I know right now there's not a therapeutic substantially separate, or thinking of other language-based programs or programs specific to different disabilities, or even expanding the vocational program. I just wanted to hear a little bit about how you would assess the need for maybe even being a flagship or the city on a hill for other districts to look at in terms of innovative programming that we would develop. How would you assess the need for that, or whether it would be useful to do that instead of sending either kids out of district or have them sort of not underserved, but we're able to serve them in the district, but perhaps they would be better served by some innovative programming. And if you had any ideas about what those would be.
So the role, so as a superintendent of schools, I certainly would have a point of view. I believe in inclusive opportunities for kids. I believe the extent to which they're regular peers, we show better outcome later in life and certainly in the longer term. But I think the reality is the extent to which we're providing specialized programming for specific need is a real area of need for us. And in fact, in discussions with Dr. Vinnis, we will be proposing to the committee in their budget a pilot language-based program in our middle school. So we're already begun that work. I think my role as a superintendent is to support our director of student services relative to special education programming, because that really is, while I certainly have that background, that training, and can add insight and offer opportunity for pause and reflection and maybe push the thinking of the teams to sort of be more creative and more thoughtful, at the end of the day, I have to be respectful and thoughtful of the structure and the organization that we have here, and that we have a very capable and competent director. And I would give her all the support in the world needed to do what she felt like needed to be done. Now, again, that is not to say I don't have an opinion, that I don't have my own experiences here, that I don't understand the need for programming, but I also need to also be really clear and thoughtful that I have a team around me who we philosophically agree and align, and that where I have a level of comfort that regardless of the specificity with which he approaches that work, that we're philosophically aligned, right? And that I give her the support that she needs to then do the job that we're asking her to do for the community. Ultimately, I will hold responsibility for decisions either way. I will be the one who will have to answer publicly for who gets to show off our successes, or also answer for our failure, right? Or our lack of success. But I think when it comes down to is really taking stock and listen to the people who are working with our students every single day around what do they need and the extent to which we can provide that. And if we can't, or if we don't have the vehicle by which, that's when we begin talking about maybe more language-based opportunities or more therapeutic opportunities. I'm hopeful that our social emotional learning program will be a level of prevention that hopefully in the long run could actually curb the need for more therapeutic, substantially separate programming for kids with emotional behavioral disorders. And I'm not saying that that is going to be a panacea or a cure-all or make the need not be there, but I think we also have a level of responsibility to be proactive and not always just so reactive. And so what are we doing on the front end to stay ahead of the curve, to be thoughtful of what's next and get the programming in place so that we avert the need for a crisis or some kind of a more severe need down the road. Yeah, but I'm a big supporter. Again, I am an advocate for children and want to make sure that, that what we do, the work that we do every single day is designed to be supportive so that all kids, regardless of ability or disability, find success. Thanks.
Go ahead, Christine.
So, hi, I'm Christine Smith, parent of a senior, as well as two other Hingham High graduates, and a former school committee member and a person who's done a lot of search committees. So I had the privilege of actually chairing the Assistant Superintendent Search Committee a couple of years ago. We had over 50 applications. Hingham always gets good applications, and it was tricky because also big shoes to fill with the retiring Ellen Keene, and we were thrilled that Dr. LaBillois joined us and is here today, sort of looking to take that next step. So my question would be, in the last 2 years, has it been a good experience in Hingham? Was it sort of what you expected? And I think you sort of filled an important role where you needed to be looked at as, I think, sort of a mentor to Dr. Gallo, but at the same time define your own vision working under someone like that, and also knowing that she would most likely be retiring sometime during your tenure. So can you speak a little bit about what your experience has been, why you particularly want the job of superintendent in Hingham, and what do you see sort of the future vision for that? Is it something that you plan to stick with for a long time? I know we've got a retiring person who's been there for quite a while, which I think is unique. So if you can just sort of, speak to that vision and speak to your experience thus far and why you want the job.
Absolutely, I'd like to. My experience so far has been great. I mean, it's had its ups and downs. I think I walked in as sort of people were expressing points of view and opinions relative to our special education programming, and I came right as those conversations were beginning and starting. That wasn't anticipated, that wasn't expected. I think I've also, as Dr. Gallo's been out the last 6 weeks, I have found myself sort of living and breathing the role in a way that I wasn't anticipating. And so I've gotten a bit of a preview in terms of the day-to-day operation. It's been a wonderful experience. I think it's also clear to note that I am not candidating to be a superintendent. I am candidating to be the superintendent of the Hingham Public Schools. So my application isn't anywhere else. This is the community that I thought long and hard about. I had a really great experience for 10 years in a community right next door in Norwell. I was really not looking for a change. I wasn't looking. I tend to find some place where I feel like it's going to be a fit and is a match for me and my skills. And then as long as you'll have me, I guess, right? I want to be here and be a part of the work that we're doing. I think that we've begun. Dr. Gallo allowed me, what she saw in me were talents and strengths that I'm in a lot of ways the yin to her yang. And I think that's also what you want to have in your assistant is somebody who complements your skill, who complements you in ways that you may not have independently. And she not only did she allow me to do that, but she allowed me to branch out into areas that was not traditional for the assistant superintendent here in the community to do. And I think that's also, go back to Carlos, your question about the faculty, is they're also trying to figure out, who is this guy? Wait a minute, we see him an awful lot. That's different. Like that's a cultural shift that I was really happy to be a part of. My experience here has been really wonderful, although punctuated with times of incredible self-doubt and wondering if I'd made the right choice in the long run. I have. I've come out the other side. I think we're a better district. The work that we're doing is phenomenal. The work that we've accomplished in 2.5 years, I think, speaks volumes of what we can do when we truly work collaboratively together. And that's not to say, listen, we're not always going to agree. And I think one of the things that I find really appealing about the culture here is there is an understanding that we can have differences of opinion, that we can disagree, that we can have lively ongoing debate, but it's in a respectful, thoughtful, and professional way. I don't see a lot of personal attacks. I see a lot of attacking of ideas, of decisions, of point of view, of variables that other people may not even know were going on. I've not seen people here have been incredibly supportive. They've been incredibly helpful. They've offered insight at times when I was a new guy and it didn't benefit anybody. Right? I mean, who was I? Right? I was the new guy on the block. But that feedback, that relationship that I feel like I've built with people in the community that would want to expand, is why I want to stay and take on this new role. Again, if I'm not the successful candidate, I think you have a mature adult assistant superintendent who can hear that. That's okay. And the work that we've done and that we have accomplished in the last several years will continue in earnest. That's one of the things I wanted to be clear with the faculty about today is regardless of the outcome, Computer science will continue. Our social emotional work will continue. All that work that we've done, our professional development program will continue to grow and expand and provide more opportunity for them to engage in meaningful ways to enhance their pedagogy and their instructional skill. And I think one of the benefits, one of the things that Hingham has allowed me to do is not only to have the idea, but to also have the resource and support to actualize that idea. So the things I'm talking about are not ideas or things in theory. They're things that we've done together in this community. And I really would love the opportunity to continue that work.
Thank you. Another question?
MB Barber, a parent. I really appreciate your last answer. I feel who I know you to be really just came through. I am wondering how you navigate the fine line between parental involvement and versus intervention in their child's special education program.
What my experience has been here, MB, is it all has to do with trust. And we're here for connection, right? We are neurobiologically wired for connection. Why we're here is to have connection with others and those around us. What my experience has been with the challenges that we've experienced, particularly in special education, is and I think this is the psychologist background in me, like I approach things a little, Stephanie, I approach things a little bit differently as I cognitively process them. If you really get to the heart of what that parent population was saying, was they were experiencing a level of disconnection from the very school that they were sending their child to. And that is where I felt like I could have an impact with the relationship building. And I think that if we do experience, and there are those families who are challenging and have high expectations, and establishing clear and healthy boundaries has also been helpful. And also not being afraid to say, I hear you, I appreciate where you're coming from, but I disagree. And but more importantly, here's why I disagree. Here's the research suggesting that that's not the way that we go. Here's the sort of the evidence that's saying we want to go this way and not that. And so just because it may be what we experienced when we were young, right, that substantially separate model, that's what most people know. What's less known is the power around inclusive practices, around exploring and growing our co-teaching capacity. That goes back to the support of our general education teachers to make sure that they're as effective educators as possible for all students, right? So I think I would really be thoughtful, and I feel like that happens, like when I experience people who come with that level of anger, that level of frustration. It's really, when you boil it all down, there's some level of disconnection between us and them, and they are the very constituents which we're designed to serve. And so I often take that as pause for reflection. One of the skills that I think Dr. Gallo has developed to a really high level that I still work toward is the ability to not take it personally. I work really hard to have a healthy balance between me in the role as a superintendent or as an assistant superintendent with me as the person. I think that sometimes the decisions you make with the responsibility that you carry in that role as a steward of the organization is sometimes different than who you are as a human being. And that while I empathize and I hear you completely, that's just outside of my purview in this context. Like that's just not something I can do, and here's why. But I would always, even people who have disagreed with me, I would hope, at least walk away. We're not always going to agree, but at least there's a level of understanding that I've understood you, and I know where you're coming from, and you feel validated and heard, and likewise. That I may not be in a place of agreement, and that has punctuated my 13 years in administration, has really been the relationships, my focus on interaction that I have found to be the most beneficial, and actually how we get the best work done is through engaging with people as human beings, seeing them for who they are. And that means embracing the vulnerability and sort of the inaccuracies, and sometimes you're wrong and you make a mistake, but I'm an adult enough to say I've made a mistake and that won't happen again. I'll tell you that right now, right? So I'm okay with that. And I think a lot of people struggle with those feelings of disconnection, and it really comes from a place of fear and of not knowing what to expect. And that's really on us, I think, on some level, to be even more communicative in an attempt to stem that, which has the potential to really destroy relationships in the long run.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, sure. Libby, go right ahead.
So, if you were to become our new superintendent, thank you. If you were to become our new superintendent, we would need to be hiring an assistant superintendent. What skills would you look for? What's the yang to your
my
yin?
yin?
The yang to your yin.
I took a very non-traditional route to sitting at this chair now, and there's still a level of profound gratitude that I'm sitting here with you. So none of that is lost on me. I've worked really hard, right, to be here, as all of us have. When I think about sort of the person who will play that right hand to me, I would want somebody with complementary skills. So for example, my trajectory was school psychologist, special education, student services director, executive director for instruction, assistant superintendent. What I don't have is building leadership experience. Now, my entire administrative career has been spent supporting building administrators, supporting the decisions that they make, supporting the implementation of curriculum and instruction, supervision. So I would want somebody who has sort of the building-based experience of running an actual school, the day-to-day operations, some of the physical plan issues that I might not bring to the role. I would want somebody with a complementary skill set, so that together, between the two of us, we sort of have all the bases covered and have areas of expertise. I want that person to also I want to be the kind of leader that I had the pleasure of working with myself. Somebody who says, here's your role, here's the expectation, but also this is your area of expertise and you feel comfort here, go and see what comes of it. Had Dr. Gallo not said those things to me, we wouldn't be where we are with social emotional learning. We wouldn't be where we are with digital literacy, computer science, and we really wouldn't be where we are with professional development. All three areas, I'm incredibly proud of the work that we've done here in this community. And I would want somebody who would have the same, would want to have the same initiative and drive to sort of take on new opportunities and new adventures and in domains that they felt a level of proficiency and expertise with.
Any other questions from the public? All right. Well, it's been a almost 12-hour day, a half a day for Dr. Gallo, but still, the rest of us are human, right? So, but I just wanted to close with a couple of comments to again thank the audience members and the community members for your engagement and participation in this process. As you can see, it is a quite lengthy process, and it is very public, and most of us in this room would never have to sit through a job interview that's being, having 7 people sitting at a table, you're 15 feet away, it's being televised. So on behalf of the school committee and the whole community, we want to thank you. Thank you for putting your name in the ring, applying for the role to become the next superintendent of the Hingham Public Schools, and I congratulate you for becoming a finalist, because there was a pool of great applicants, and this is a great school system, and we're looking for greatness from everyone. So we appreciate you putting your name out there. We appreciate you going through this process, and no matter what happens, you deserve a huge round of applause, if I may, for making it to this round, because you have been wonderful to the district, and we really appreciate everything you do every day. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do I need to make a motion? Have a motion to take a quick 5-minute break? All right, we're going to take like a 5-minute break. I will walk Dr. Jamie out, and then
thank you,
reconvene.
everybody. Nice to see you.
Oh, and I'm sorry. Sorry. Hello again. Thank you, everyone. Just very quickly, this is Dr. Earl Metzler from Superintendent of Schools in New Hampshire, and he is with us tonight as one of our candidates for the position of Superintendent of Hingham Public Schools. Since Dr. Metzler is not is new to the community and has quickly met some of the school committee members. Some of us spent the day with him today, but others were not able to do that. So we're going to quickly go around the table, introduce the school committee members, just name how long you've been on the school committee, and then I will do a quick, brief framework for Dr. Metzler's benefit. You know how this works, but he does not. And then we'll get started. So, Carrie.
I'm Carrie Nee, and I was elected last April.
Libby Lewicki, and I was elected last April.
Carlos da Silva, hello again. And I am a parent of two graduates of the school system.
I'm Ed Schreier. I guess the parent of two graduates of the Hingham Public School System, and this is my 8th year on the school committee.
I'm Kay Proshma. Oops, where's the? Oh, it's the wrong one. I'm Kay Proshma. I currently have 3 boys in the Hingham Public School System, and I'm serving now my 3rd year on the school committee.
Liza O'Reilly, I'm in my 5th year on the school committee.
I'm Michelle Ayer. This is my 2nd year in the school committee, and we spent a lot of time together today already. So just so you understand, Dr. Metzler, what we will do, the interview will last about 90 minutes. Each school committee member has prepared some questions covering specific themes that were important to the community as we discovered in our outreach to the community about what they wanted in a new superintendent. So we'll open the session with our questions. It should take about 60, 70 minutes for our questions, and then we will open questions up to the public. If this is meant to be a little bit conversational, so we may go over the 70 minutes on our end, or we may have more or less time for public questions and answers, but we will certainly make time for that. We want to thank you very much for being here. We had explained to the audience earlier that it's been a very long day, so we appreciate what you've done. And we want to thank you for applying for the role and want to congratulate you on becoming a finalist for this position. So I will ask the first question of tonight, and since this is your 2nd visit to Hingham, just curious what your impressions are. What are your initial impressions of the community?
Well, great. Well, first, let me take this opportunity to thank the town of Hingham. It's quite an honor to even be interviewed, and certainly an even greater honor to be allowed to spend the day here, really with a listening tour and an opportunity to speak to stakeholders in each of your buildings and your parents and certainly town officials. So it's been an incredible experience for me. You're right, it has been a long day. My impressions, you know, in each building, you know, what I found was there was a kindness about the people that I had an opportunity to interact with, you know, while they were asking questions. You know, seeing smiles on not just the people that work there's face, but the children that I happened to run into throughout the day. Had the opportunity to have a story read to us today, which was pretty incredible. You have so many special things. I mean, some of the facilities are spectacular. You know, makerspace to STEMlit to different programs and opportunities for children. It just seems that this town has provided the administrators, the teachers, the children, the families, all the resources to be really successful. So it comes as no surprise to me, as I admired the work in Hingham for many years, for 25 years while I was in Quincy. I wasn't that far away. So again, thank you, and my impressions were just one of, you know, felt very welcome and very comfortable, and that was really a tribute to the town and the people that work here. So thank you.
Carlos?
So we have over 650 employees. They belong to 6 unions. Can you please tell us about your experiences with collective bargaining? Then describe how you view the role of the school committee in the various stages of the collective bargaining process.
Excellent. Well, I've had, obviously in my previous roles as a principal, I was not involved in collective bargaining per se. As a superintendent, I've had the opportunity I don't want to get the number wrong, but 7 or 8 contracts that I've negotiated with various unions. The school board, also known as the school committee, has given me a different responsibility. And, there have been times when I've been the lead, but I think it's really important that the school committee is the one that really takes the lead in terms of endorsing the collective bargaining agreement. They need to see that the school committee is behind the work and behind the agreement, certainly at the recommendation of the superintendent. I think the superintendent is an ambassador to both the labor force and the management, including the school committee.
Thank you. Libby?
So ideally, how should technology be used in a school system, and how should it be integrated into teaching and learning?
Excellent. Well, obviously, districts work on a technology plan. I find it to be a great resource to teachers. Certainly, there's a number of ways, with one-to-one initiatives, certainly distance learning, opportunity. I know there's been some discussion. I know it's early discussion about how you could use technology perhaps for blizzard bag days, on days when school is canceled. I know it's not a school committee discussion at this point, but I know there is a town in Massachusetts that has started that program. It's a very aggressive program. I started that program in Hampstead when I first got there, and Timberlane. It's an opportunity for students to engage in an online learning day in the event that schools can't be open because they're not safe to travel to. Technology, it's an important piece. It's a resource. It's a tool. And I think it's something that, with proper planning, can be very valuable. It also there's a tremendous amount of responsibility because as we use technology, we start to engage with the use of social media. And I think it really needs to be monitored in a way so that it's done in a responsible way. And I think that that's really something that the school committee, in terms of policy, should be very much involved in. Superintendent, in terms of oversight with building level administrators and staff, to make sure that when we do use it, that we use it in a responsible manner.
Great. Thank you. Carrie?
So my question is in the area of special education. In your view, what role do general education teachers play in the education of students with disabilities and in the implementation of IEP services? Can you give us some examples of ways you have supported general education teachers in your district to ensure that they are able to effectively educate all students, including those with disabilities?
Excellent. Well, I think it's a team approach. As a middle school, that was a full inclusion middle school. As a principal, we had a modification specialist and a content specialist, and they co-taught. I think it's important that the regular education teacher has a deep understanding of the service delivery page. So in terms of special ed audits, and whether it's a district level or whether it's at the building level, always wanted to make sure that the general education teacher had a deep understanding of what the service delivery page meant. And so, in different roles, made sure that service delivery page was, something that they had access to and that they were checking. It could be simple modifications like the student needs to sit up front or the student needs a scribe, to other modifications that we need to make sure that they're being adhered to. Special ed, an IEP is a contract. It's an agreement that we have with families, and it's our obligation to meet all those obligations and make sure that those services are being delivered. As part of some of those audits, some of the work that I was most proud of is when we were offering a lot more than the IEP said we had to. And so that meant offering services in subjects like science and social studies where, sometimes the services were only in reading, language, and math. So I think it's important, but I also think it's important that the special educators partner with the general educators so that they work together to make sure that we do the best we can for all students.
Thank you. Ed, do you have a question? Your turn.
Dr. Metzler, welcome. How would you lead towards excellence in the aspect of system operations as it applies towards fields, grounds, and maintenance.
Could you repeat that? That's okay.
Sure.
Thanks.
How would you lead towards excellence in the aspect of system operations as it applies towards fields, grounds, and maintenance?
Excellent. That's what. So, in terms of core values, in terms of accountability, evaluation, rigor, and support, that holds true in the classroom and out of the classroom. Systems that we develop are with desired outcomes. Making sure that you walk the grounds, making sure that that the fields are things that the people that live in the town of Hingham could be proud of. Making sure that you hold people accountable that you work with and for, to make sure that we're doing the very best with the resources that are provided by the school committee. So there are checks and balances in terms of how you go about that, and really, having a schedule and making sure that the schedule is adhered to and that there's a way to evaluate to make sure that people are doing a really good job. I think that's where you get back to the accountability piece and the evaluation piece. In the event that you were to notice things that are things that perhaps the people in the town would not be proud of, that they're addressed in a very respectful and timely manner. And I think that's important. I think setting up systems so that people can actually report, to the superintendent's office or to the building leaders, things that they think need attention, and making sure, again, that you address those in a very responsible, respectful, and timely manner.
Great, thank you. Do you want to go with your budget question?
Could you please explain the process you use in developing a school system budget and how you go about selling your proposed budget to the school committee and the community? And in addition, how do you define and justify wants and needs when available dollars cannot cover all requests?
Excellent. So some of these questions are a little tricky, primarily because the two districts that I'm the superintendent of do things very differently. So I'll answer it somewhat two-part because I have to do it two different ways. In Hampstead, for instance, the school board, is 100% responsible for the development of the budget with the superintendent. In Timberlane, there's a budget committee, and the budget committee develops the proposed budget. The school board develops the default budget. Now, a default budget is last year's budget minus one-time expenses and any contractual obligations. The default budget would be put in place in the event that the proposed budget fails at the ballot. So basically, in terms of wants and needs and how we decide what's important, we turn to our strategic plan. Some of the work is done ahead of time, in a sense. So if you looked at Hampstead, for instance, when we have made a priority, STEM education, STEAM education a priority, and the school board decides that there are particular needs that have to be included in that budget, we turn to the strategic plan. That's been really helpful in terms of selling it to the community. There are no surprises and no excuses when it comes to what they can expect. Timberlane, it's a little bit different. It's a cooperative district. It's 4 towns. And so a lot of times in terms of trying to sell the budget or to the community, it speaks to equity. It speaks to the distribution of resources in the fair and most cooperative way. And that happens with the budget as well. So again, we look at what the direction of the district in terms of what are the resources that we absolutely have to support the goals that we're already supported on, whether they're the school board goals, whether they're the superintendent's goals, whether they're the district goals or the building level goals, and school action plans. So I think we make sure that every dollar that we budget for is somehow associated with one of the goals in that following year. For the most part, I think it seems to make sense to folks, and they support our budget. We've been pretty fortunate. We don't have 100% of our proposed budgets passing. We've had a couple of default budgets in my time there. Sometimes that happens because we have it's a very different process. At a deliberative session, the general floor can drive the budget up, and that may or may not pass at the ballot. And so that would not necessarily be the budget that was recommended by the superintendent through the school committee, school board. But it would be the budget that would be on the ballot. And so that's where it gets to be a little bit tricky. Trying to make sure that we survey and we find out what's most important to the stakeholders, and making sure, again, that the budget speaks to goals and goals speak to results.
Could you explain a little bit to the audience about, in your town, the political process of when you're preparing the budget, of how people can change it from the floor as opposed to just working with the school committee and then going on to town meeting, or to the ballot box. But just to explain that, because it's fascinating. And
I would be happy to. So the process, after you get a proposed budget put together, that you go to a public hearing. And so it would be a meeting like this, and you would explain the budget to the public, and they'd be able to ask some questions. And then some time would pass, and you'd have the next part of that would be called the deliberative session. It'd be another meeting very much like this, but there'd be a lot more people there. And when you're going through, any member of the public can go up to the microphone and can add or subtract to that budget. And whatever that room ends up voting on that night, that is the number that goes to the ballot for the election. And so I referred to, if that is a number that's higher than the default and it fails, you then would have the default budget, which is the previous year's budget minus one-time expenses plus any contractual obligations. So sometimes, even the default budget may go up 2 or 3% based on health care and bus contracts and those special ed obligations. But it's a really interesting process. It's really a town meeting where there's a lot of energy and excitement, and that budget time of the year really engages the community, people with children and people without. Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay.
So, good evening. This one, right?
So there's a lot of microphones. They're all for different purposes.
So, would you please describe the various ways you communicate? I'm screaming at the viewers.
You got to give us more lead time. There's been 3 of us.
Would you please describe the various ways you communicate as the superintendent to the school committee, staff, parents, students, and community? Give examples of the types of media you use and the tone, style, or manner you try to express.
Excellent. Well, very traditional in some ways. Phone calls go home, and that may be something that's time sensitive. We use press releases. I use Twitter a great deal to communicate with students and staff, primarily around snow days, but other happenings in the district, school board updates in terms of school events. So I try to keep everybody up to date and current. My style is really one of a refreshing frankness. I share as much as I possibly can. We're as transparent about the activities in the district, whether it's something that may happen in the, we just had a gym floor refinished, and it may be an odor that may impact teaching and learning, getting that message out, or it may be excited because you just had a student sign a Division I athletic scholarship and you have a signing. Any of those kind of incidents, if you would, or celebrations, or, are the kinds of things that need to be communicated out in a timely way. There could be emergencies that I have to make sure that parents are updated and students are updated. I don't use Facebook. I typically try to communicate as much as possible face-to-face. I visit schools, I talk to people. So my style is really an open door style where I spend a lot of time communicating with the stakeholders in the district.
Thank you. I also have another question. Other than the regular communications that you provide, what do you think is critical to communicate at the time of a crisis?
Communicating at the time of a crisis? I think honesty is important to communicate at a time of a crisis, but we also have to keep in mind, you don't want to create more of a crisis by being honest and timing it wrong. So I think it's important that people have what they need to know in a timely way. So a lot of times, if you send out a message, you may have to have a follow-up to explain perhaps a process. I think, a time of a crisis is a time to be traditional in a sense of leadership styles. It's a time to stand in front. It's a time to lead. There are many times when you can lead by standing behind, but that's an opportunity, I think, from a communications perspective. That needs to come from the superintendent's office and it needs to be timely, it needs to be accurate, and it needs to be honest.
I have getting a little deeper into that question. So leadership and management are two distinct roles of the superintendent. So how do you distinguish between those two, and what can you describe your approaches to both?
Excellent. So, when I think of leadership and I think of a leadership style, and you've heard me say it several times, you lead by standing behind sometimes, and I consider that more management. If you surround yourself with really smart, bright people, and you help manage the work, that would be an example of management. I think when there are times of crisis, that's a time to lead in a more traditional manner. There are times when you're dealing with safety and security. There are times when directives need to be issued. That would be a time when you'd want to choose a more traditional leadership style. I'm participatory when it comes to anything that touches the classroom with support staff. Anytime that there are things that may impact their ability to do the job, they need to participate in that process. And finally, I consult. When I don't know, I make sure that I find out from somebody that does know. I don't need to be the smartest guy in the room. What I do need to do is get honest answers or solutions to potential problems. And if there are particular areas where I don't feel like I have the answer or anybody else that works for me has the answer, sometimes we need to go to a consultant or outside to find that answer. So I would say, typically we'll try to select a leadership style based on the particular issue. And I think that, empowering the people that work for you in terms of management is important in times when the work is not a safety or security issue, but more of a day-to-day operations issue.
Carlos, yeah?
Dr. Metzler, how do you collaborate with teachers, principals, and the assistant superintendent? How do you deal with them when they express views you oppose?
I missed the last part of that, I'm sorry.
How do you deal with them when they express views you oppose?
I couldn't catch that. Well, that's the healthy discussion, in terms of whether I meet with principals. I give the principals an opportunity to meet, and it's their agenda. I don't put anything on their agenda. Behind closed doors, we can agree to disagree, but I think we push each other to come up with the absolute best solution, and when we come out of the room, we all support it. So, I ask for feedback. We have really healthy discussions. I change my mind regularly based on the input from the stakeholders. So I would say, there are times when, a decision may have been made by the school committee, and I'm executing it, and their views may not necessarily line up with the school committee. That's my job as the ambassador, to kind of bring those two worlds together. But I'm open-minded. I certainly listen to people. Like I said, I surround myself with really bright people. It wouldn't be very smart if I didn't listen to them when they have great ideas. They have an opportunity to talk me into a different outcome or a different solution, if you will. I say to my executive assistant regularly, please let me know if you don't think we're doing the right thing now. So we're always trying to focus on doing the greatest good for the greatest number of people. And I think, a superintendent needs to be, you need to be a leader, but you also need to be a listener. And so I believe I'm both. I listen to people that are close to me. Like I said, I surround myself with really bright people, and they help groom me in my role.
So this question is about curriculum. New Hampshire has been a leader in competency-based education. What are your views on this approach? Do you see Hingham moving in that direction, and why or why not?
Well, in terms of competency-based education, I'm a firm believer in not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There are some things that have worked really well for a really long time, especially in high-achieving districts. There is a place for competency education, and I believe in more of a hybrid version. I'm not quite sure if that's something that Hingham would want to move towards in the near future. I certainly have a great deal of experience with it and certainly could share that experience, but That's a discussion I think I'd have at the school committee at a later date, and if that was something that you would want explored, it's certainly something I could make recommendations about. Pinkerton Academy has somewhat of a hybrid version, so does Timberlane, so we do a little bit of both, and that's more at the high school and a little bit at the middle school. So it's competency basis, it has its benefits, but I think, again, sometimes we're quick to change to what the newest fad is, and I'm not quite sure I'd be quick to change what Hingham is doing, because what you've been doing really well for a long time.
You visited our Foster Elementary School, which needs to be renovated or replaced. Any experience in this area, and how would you help?
Great. Well, in terms of my Massachusetts experience, I was very much involved in the planning and working with the renovation of Point Middle School in Quincy Point. Was very much a part of a team with the siting of the new Quincy High School. Very much of a part, and they're building it now as we speak, Sterling Middle School, although that was something I thought was going to happen 20 years ago. So in New Hampshire, we've had several really aggressive renovations, rebuilds, that we have not had the opportunity to engage in because we haven't passed them at the ballot. One in Hampstead, for instance, we've had on the ballot every single year since I've been there, and they had it on the ballot before I even started there. So, as far as working to make sure that we build the trust within the community, so it's something that the community can support at the ballot, I think is a primary role and responsibility as superintendent. You're an ambassador to those projects, so working closely in terms of with the school committee and all the stakeholders, to try to get that kind of support. I think it's interesting when you have 4 elementary schools and one school needs work, we're back to the equity question again, and I think it's really working with the other communities within those 4 elementary schools, those other 3 communities, to help support the project, because that's the only way you're going to get it passed at the ballot. Obviously, the Foster community won't be able to pass it alone.
Thank you. Sorry, Libby. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay.
If you were to become our new superintendent, how would you collaborate with and delegate to our current assistant superintendent?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm very professional in the way I go about business and building relationships. I had the opportunity in a very similar situation when I took my current position. The former assistant superintendent was also a candidate, had worked in that district for 26 years. We developed a really strong bond of trust. He went on to be a superintendent in another district, and since has moved on to a second district as superintendent, and we've become and continue to be very good friends. So I think it's a collegial piece. I think relationships take time. Trust takes time. You earn trust. You don't demand trust. Respect. You have to earn respect. So I think we'd have to spend quite a bit of time together and build that relationship and do the best work we can for the town of Hingham.
Sure.
Could you give us an example of an innovative curriculum initiative that you have directed? And could you also give us an example of a program that was not successful and describe the course of action you took as a result?
Well, one program that I'm proud of that we put in place, as students struggle with informational text, we were able to put a program in. It's called Achieve 3000. Typically, when you do your initial assessment, you'll find that many schools are somewhere in the 25 to 30% proficient range. That's a program that has been successful. We've been able to move that needle up to about 50%, which sounds really low, but it's really not low. That's quite a bit of growth in terms of moving students into the proficient category in terms of reading and understanding informational text. The way I go about monitoring that is, it's about usage. If you invest in a program and you don't use it, you certainly can't hold the vendor accountable for something that you're not using efficiently. So I have a monitoring system where on my desk on Monday mornings, I get a report of where it was used and how, and certainly any places that it wasn't used, building level administrators are there to find out those reasons. So, that's a program that has worked quite well. Off the top of my head, trying to think of a program that has failed, I'm struggling, not because that hasn't happened, I just don't have one off the top of my head, so I apologize. We evaluate, what we do. I think we're reflective practitioners in the way we go about our business. So we haven't really ever implemented something that I would consider a failure that required some sort of remediation after the fact. So, thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to? Okay. So by many measures, Hingham is a very high-performing school district, and we owe a lot of that to the success that Dr. Gallo has had as the leader and manager of the district. So if you were to take on the reins of the superintendent role, how would you define success? What would you be looking to, how would you measure your success in the district?
Excellent. Well, there are so many variables to look at, multiple measures in terms of how you define success. If our students are kind, if they're good global citizens, if they're engaging in community service, if they're achieving on standardized assessments, that's great. But there's so many multiple measures to define the climate and culture of a district, K to 12. I would define success as having responsible citizens that have options when they graduate from our high school. Whether it's the college or career or the military, that the success really would be, when you do an exit interviews, that they felt like we provided them every opportunity to be the best that they could be, to be able to explore their dreams, and that we did everything possible. I meet with student leaders occasionally and ask that question, and they're so kind. They typically take responsibility if they aren't as successful as they had hoped to be. I had always hoped to be an Ivy League student, but I'm going to a different level college. And I asked the question, well, what didn't we do? And typically they would take responsibility. So being a reflective practitioner, I would define success, in terms of graduating really responsible, respectful citizens that have opportunities to contribute to the community, again, whether it's college, career, or the military. And I think that would be having a high graduation rate, having students that want to be here, having students that come back and contribute to the community over a long period of time. Those are ways that I think I would define success.
Could you please share with us what the professional development program looks like in your district, and then also share with us, if you could establish your ideal professional development program, what would that look like?
Well, I want to start with the second half of that. I do believe we do have the ideal professional development plan, and I'll tell you why. First, having an opportunity to have student voice, hearing from students about how they feel about teaching and learning in the classroom, having a valid and reliable tool. We use the tripod survey to get that information. And so we use that information, and that information goes individually to teachers. No, we don't use it to evaluate the teachers, but the teachers use it to evaluate themselves. They have an opportunity to self-reflect and self-select professional development. We design all of our professional development based on what students have to say about teaching and learning. And in the tripod survey, if you're not familiar with it, it has areas where it's reflective on how students feel about how challenging the teacher may be or how compassionate the teacher may be. And so we find a way to develop our professional development for them based on, again, on student voice, and I believe it's valid and reliable information. We also do that at the building and district level. We do look at that in the central office, but we don't look at individual results, obviously, because a deal I had with the union was we were not going to use the student data to evaluate them as instructors. Also, the professional development is also for administrators. What are you doing for administrators? What are you doing for support staff? Well, I'll focus on administrators for a second. We use a union survey. The union has their own survey that they develop. Hasn't been tested for validity and reliability. However, it does provide us some information. We use our own valid and reliable version, and then we triangulate the information. And so from that, I'm able to find out what the instructional staff and support staff, what they feel they need from the administrative staff in terms of support. And so from that came the Timberlane Executive Leadership Academy. So all of their professional development is really coming from the teachers and support staff in terms of what they feel our administrators need for professional development. The administrators get some opportunity to self-reflect and self-select. However, this is a big part of TILA. This is a big part because when I focus on our core values of accountability, rigor, evaluation, and support, this is a support piece. And so I think it closes that loop in a sense of making sure that the teachers and support staff feel that they're getting the kind of support they need from administrators, and the administrators are getting the kind of professional development they need, while at the same time teachers are selecting professional development that's important to them. And I think over a period of time, this has improved teaching and learning and our climate and culture in a great way. I will say that teachers are. They don't enjoy having things done to them. They like having things done for them. And so I didn't want our professional development program like it was something to them. A lot of times you'll have a guest speaker come in and they'll have some inspiring speech, and then everybody goes back to work, and there's no sustainability. There's no follow-through. It's not part of a plan. So that professional development plan has been one. It's systemic in nature, and I think it's developed. It's produced extreme results for us in our district.
For the tripod survey, how does that work in the younger grades, kindergarten, first, second grade?
Yeah, it's age appropriate, so it's the questions are geared towards the age of the student, and so we're able to use that district-wide, and they're able to disseminate. The information goes back to the folks at Tripod, and then we get reports back, so they're able to figure out a way to calibrate that information for us.
Carrie, sure.
So special education is a particular challenge because of the complexity of the laws, students' needs, resources, and parent concerns. What have you done in your district to make special education department work better while balancing the needs of the students with the fiscal responsibility to the school department? Additionally, what criteria do you use to assess the effectiveness of your special education programs?
Excellent. Well, in different roles, obviously, looking at full inclusion, I'm a firm believer in making sure that all students have equal access to the curriculum. We've had outside groups come in and do audits on our education program and provide findings. And so if there are any shortcomings, we address those in a timely manner. Through the budgeting process, through our special education office, we make sure that mission, vision, if you will, is carried out and that students get what they need. Many times I've had the opportunity to participate because things will get to my desk, and it's terms about equity, making sure that all kids get what they need. And so our special education department is no different. We make sure that the students get exactly what they need, and we make sure that the budget supports that.
What has prompted the outside audits?
The outside audit, the Department of Education would do that. We volunteered to have it done. New Hampshire is a different model, so you have opportunities that they provide, and so we had a comprehensive audit where they came in and they go through all your ed plans, they go through all your practices and procedures, and highlight best practices, and anywhere where they find any kind of discrepancies, if you will, or shortcomings, they report that back to you, and you give an opportunity to take care of that and then invite them back in. So we're just on the tail end of that process, which I'm very proud that we've had some pretty stellar reports from the Department of Education in New Hampshire.
Can you share with us what you feel is the ideal superintendent-school committee relationship?
I feel like the ideal superintendent, school committee, school board relationship is one of a governance team, where for you it's 7, so it'd be a team of 8. Obviously, the superintendent is a non-voting member, but that you work together as a governance team, that it's not us versus them, that we're working together. My job is obviously to make recommendations to you, and whether it's in public and very transparent, or whether it's in non-public or executive session, if it's an issue that's sensitive in nature. And when I come out of that room, I execute your will. I work at the will of the board. So the ideal relationship is one that's, the communication is open, it's honest, and it's one where, that I feel, if I'm in that role, that I have your support one that's not undermining, one that's not working against the work of the district. So to me, I get back to that governance team, and it sounds very simple, but we really would be a team of 8, and we really should be working together. And that, I think, is the ideal relationship.
Thank you. Yes, I have a question. So what skills do you look for in your administrators and principals? And do you have any particular mentoring style that you provide to them?
Yeah, well, the skills, I look for honest people that are loyal, that are very bright, that have had success, and I'm talking principals, I prefer my principals to have had classroom experience. It's a credibility piece when you're trying to, when you're evaluating a teacher and you're giving feedback about instructional practice strategies. It's not an absolute must, but it's certainly something I look for. My mentoring, depending on the hire, sometimes you hire a seasoned person, and they may need to have some mentoring to fit into the district, but they may have all the skills that are necessary to do the job. If it's somebody that's younger and new, I may spend more time with them. I may meet weekly with them. I may have, they invite me down to their school, or I invite them up to the office. I make myself available 24/7. I make myself available to my school board members. I have 14 of them 24/7. And believe me, they do take advantage of it, whether it's a text or a phone call or an email, that sort of thing. I think in terms of mentoring, everybody's very different, about what they need. So, trying to figure out what I think they need to become better at what they do, and then kind of balancing it off with what they think they need. But, I'm also a reflective practitioner, so a lot of times I like to, after something happens and decisions are made, in a very calming, after the fact kind of way, kind of go back over what we did and what we did well and what we didn't do so well, as a team. But providing that kind of support, that I'll answer my phone any hour of any day and certainly provide them with what I think is good advice when they seek it. But I do want them to work towards, independent. I want them to be strong leaders. I want them to do very much some of the same things that I talked about. I'd like for them to lead by standing behind. I'd like for them to consider their leadership styles, but I also want them to stand out in front when necessary. So, I look for people that have strong personalities. Again, you asked the question earlier, what do I do when people have opposing views? I like to be questioned. I like to be challenged. And so I expect my building principals and district level administrators to do that. And those are some of the skills that I look for in leadership as I develop a team. There's a piece that I left out of this. It's loyalty. I'm loyal to them. They're loyal to the district. Hopefully a loyal relationship, so that that's how trust gets built over time. And and being there for each other to support each other in whether there are good times or bad times, whether we're successful or unsuccessful, but really in a reflective practitioner kind of mode to really take a look and be able to figure out what you did well and what we didn't do well, and then build from there.
Great. Anyone? Any other committee questions right now? All right. I'll reserve the right to take some more committee questions, but if anyone from the audience has a question that they'd like to ask at this point, if you could come up to the mic and just give your name and direct your question to Dr. Metzler.
Oh, the pressure.
I know.
Hello, welcome. I'm Tim Dempsey. I'm a Hingham parent of 2 boys at East. I'm also the chair of CPAC in Hingham. I'm also a teacher. I did my student teaching at North Quincy High, so familiar with that. But my question is about program development. I think you're right that what Hingham does, it does very well, and it's a very high-achieving school district. There's a lot that Hingham doesn't do, and there's some real opportunity here to develop innovative programming for specific populations, whether it be a language-based program, substantially separate therapeutic program, even to expand the vocational program. So I was wondering if you have experience with developing programs that could really be, flagship programs for Hingham that, you know, as an example to other cities around, but also how you would sort of look at the system and decide what our needs are for specific programming that we could innovate.
So in respect to programming and having an opportunity, you know, people, you know, a lot of times they're like, you know, what are your first 100 days going to be like? What is your first year going to be like? What is it, you know, what's the plan? I think it's really important that whoever the new superintendent is takes the opportunity to understand what the traditions are in Hingham, which, you know, are the things that need to be protected. But with a fresh set of eyes, I'm sure that there are areas that you could improve on. Even, you know, great districts have disenfranchised people, you know, that need to be re-engaged, programs that could meet in particular subgroups, as you mentioned. You know, I've had the opportunity to start a program in Timberlane, which now Hampstead is looking to adopt. It's a FLES program. It's foreign language in elementary school, and I was proud to hear that you have languages that are important to the Hingham Public Schools. That was a program that we started. We had only had a half-day kindergarten at the time when I got there, and I thought, well, if you're having some success with half-day, you know, like a diet, right? If you were on half a diet, wouldn't a full diet be better? Right? So, you know, it was some talk about whether or not we needed to have another vote at the ballot, and I was like, it's an existing program that we're expanding on. So we changed. We went from half-day program. We made a full-day kindergarten. We made it a Renaissance kindergarten program with foreign language, and so we added Spanish in kindergarten. We're up to 4th grade. We're in the process, and I hesitate to call it a bilingual school district, but we have a cohort of students that are going to be proficient in 2 languages by the time they get to middle school. You know, my hope is that they'll pick up a 3rd language along the way and then take Latin in their junior and senior year. That was another program. So part of the program of studies, I've had experience with programs, but I think, you know, in being fair to Hingham, you know, what would those programs look like? I think part of that is that first 100 days or that first year or however long it takes is taking an inventory about all the things that you do really well and things that are tradition and need to be protected, and then to do a real needs assessment about where are some areas where we think we can improve, and then we get into that needs and wants. You know, what can we afford to do? You know, what are creative ways to fund particular initiatives? You know, I started a business partnership. They didn't have any business partnership in New Hampshire. People feel like they're taxed enough already. You know, so you ask businesses to partner with you, and I wasn't looking for money. I was looking for partners, you know. So how can you get involved with our Project Lead the Way program? You know, you have engineers that work at your particular company, different things with the YMCA and different partners that, yeah, we can partner. It's not about donating money. It might be donating time. It might be donating resources. We actually may even help you. You know, you're a small bookstore. Everybody's going to Barnes and Nobles, but maybe we can do business with your bookstore in terms of getting students involved. So, you know, there are big and small ways to go about this business, but I think in terms of program development, I've always been innovative in terms of identifying what I believe is an area that we can work on. Sometimes I call them solution providers. You know, are there other vendors or programs that are already things that we need to implement, we could buy and implement, or are they things that we need to create ourselves and implement? But so I've had quite a bit of experience with that. That was one program. I certainly there are other programs that, you know. But what does Hingham need? What are some of those programs? Well, I think I'm going to reserve judgment and listen to the stakeholders. I think it's really important. That's that participatory piece that I talked about in terms of leadership, making sure that you hear from people. I think, you know, similar to the changes that I was able to make at North Quincy High School, you know, how do you convince people in a place that's been doing a really good job for a really long time that there are other ways to do things that aren't going to have a negative impact on what they already do well? So I think my work in Hampstead is very similar to that as it was at North Quincy High School. I think that would be the similar here in Hingham. I think it's slow, deliberate change that makes sense, that's research-based, that's safe. You know, you asked about a program that failed. You know, I think we do a really good job making sure that the program won't fail. I think, you know, if I ask you to help me and support and fund a resource, the last thing I want to do is be coming back to you and saying, you know, all that money that we spent on this particular resource, well, it failed and didn't produce any results. So those are all important things that have to be factored in, but it's certainly something that would be obviously fresh on any new superintendent's mind. So thank you.
Dr. Metzler. Welcome to Hingham. My name is Carol Falvey, and I'm a former school committee member. So one thing tonight I haven't heard anybody ask is, why are you applying for this job here in Hingham?
It's a great question. You know, as I went through my career, and my aspiration was to be a superintendent, and so I had the opportunity to take a job in New Hampshire, and back in 2012, you know, a multi-district. I think it was at the time I didn't realize how challenging that would be for someone that didn't have superintendent's experience. You know, there's an intellectual and emotional maturity that you need with this position that I think that has helped. But to your question, you know, I was very honest with them back in 2012. You know, I'm homesick. You know, South Shore is where we were for many years. The plan was always to return back to the South Shore. You know, when the Hingham position became available, you know, the opportunity to be part of the discussion, which was quite an honor, to lead one of the best districts, in my opinion, in the leading state in public education in the nation. I'm not saying that because I'm in Massachusetts tonight. I tell the people in New Hampshire that as well. They don't like hearing it, but it's the truth. You know, the work in Timberlane is very much a Massachusetts district in New Hampshire. We do it right. You do it well, and imitation is the best form of flattery. You know, Hingham is a wonderful town. I admired the work here for many years, and I wasn't quite sure, you know, where we would return to on the South Shore, but this was an opportunity. The timing is good, and so it's a place that I think anybody in my role, I can't imagine, I can't think of a reason why I wouldn't want to work here. And, you know, that was reaffirmed today as I went through the buildings, you know, really kind, welcoming people in these beautiful buildings with great kids and tremendous support and resources. You should be proud, you know, whether you select me or not. You know, this experience has been, it's been extremely rewarding. My 2 visits here have contributed to my growth in ways that I'll figure out as I reflect on this experience. But I can tell you in real time that it has been a very rewarding and powerful experience for me, regardless of what may happen. But that's really it, you know.
That's great. Thank you.
Right. There we go. Hi, my name is Susanna Cahaline. And I'm a parent and a former teacher, but I'm a foster school parent. And so my question is, you correctly identified, our problem is that foster is one of 4 elementary schools. But we need full community support for our building project, which is immediate and extremely necessary and probably very expensive. And so you spoke about how Hampstead, I believe it was, has had a building initiative on the ballot that just hasn't passed for all these years. From that experience, with it not passing and things that you've tried to do with communicating with the community, what could you bring to Hingham that you could, in concrete terms, what could you tell me that you would implement as far as a communication program to try and get the full support of the community behind that individual building project?
Excellent. Well, I think, you know, as I talk about, you know, renovation or building projects and the need for them, you know, whether it's a cooperative school district where there's 4 towns all competing for the same money, and you're talking about equity, about who needs it most. I mean, I think it's clear you've identified in Hingham, when we look at 4 elementary schools, that one elementary school is really, when we speak to equity, is in need of some renovations, some to put a shine on a sneaker, and so to speak. But I think getting the support from those 3 other communities within the community, or those 3 other school communities, if you will, or professional learning communities. You know, we've done a number of things. You know, we've done infomercials, we've done, you know, building tours, we've done leaflet drops, gone building, you know, door to door. I think, you know, getting that 60% is a big ask. You know, we've been in the mid-50s, and, you know, there's a little bit more work to be done. But I think, you know, convincing people, I think it gets back to that it's something that we need. It's not just something that we want. I think that that's really the work. And so, you know, from the communication from the superintendent's office on down, I think it's a community effort in terms of sharing that message. I know the school committee would lead that, as well as the superintendent, the district office, obviously the building. But if that was a priority, and I know it is, you know, it would be given my undivided attention, and I certainly would do anything and everything that I could, and try to be creative as possible. Some of those things that I mentioned, I don't know if they've been done here in the past. I would imagine they have been. I can tell you one mistake, you Timberlane made in regards to a renovation project. Going through the building prior to my arrival, the buildings, it was a mess. It was an athletic wing. And so as they went through, they thought somehow that the community would realize, like, wow, this is really a mess, and really, you really need a new facility. That was not quite the reaction. The reaction was more like, why would we give you a new facility when you haven't taken care of the one that you have? So, I made sure that we spent a tremendous amount of time making sure that that was clean and respected, and and we still have it. It's all we have. We haven't been able to renovate it. It's still the same old athletic wing, but it's clean. Sometimes it's paint, sometimes it's custodial work, sometimes it's student responsibility, coach's responsibility. It is the athletic wing. But I can tell you that the only guarantee I can give you is I'll work as hard as I can and do the best that I can, and certainly I'm open to ideas, and certainly would solicit, what would Hingham need to be able to provide that kind of support for that project. What kind of work out of the superintendent's office? What resources would I have available to help pass that and take that on as a real mission? It's really deflating, and it's deflating to a school committee. It's deflating to a community. You do all that work, and it goes to the ballot, and it fails. And so we've suffered that in March each year, and so each year we come back, ready to try to get it done again, because it's something that we need, not just something that we want. So, I would do everything I could, and I certainly would be, embracing the community in every way I possibly could to get that done.
Thank you. Any other? Yeah, please.
Dr. Metzler, I'm NB Barber. It's good to see you again. I'm a parent, and I was wondering how you navigate the fine line between parental involvement versus interference in their child's special education program.
Great. So being part of that team, if you're a special ed parent out there, you know how daunting it can be to be at the table by yourself with an entire team of people and feeling like you need some advocacy. Sometimes people hire advocates. Sometimes the team makes recommendations that aren't quite the recommendations that you would hope to hear. I have to tell you that, I don't think that there is a time when a parent is too involved in terms of advocacy for their children. I mean, it's what we should do. It's what I do for my children. I would expect special ed parents, and I take great pride in stepping in at times for parents of children with special needs to make sure that we're providing services. Again, it's about equity, and if it's things that resources that we have available in our budget. When I was a building principal, I always felt like I was going to central office, and I would tell the parent, here's the number you call too. We're going to do what we need to do to get what your child needs. If I have it in the building, it's yours. If I need to get it from central office, so be it. What's been interesting in New Hampshire, it's a little bit reversed. I don't know why they do this, but it's good for me. I get to say yes. Everybody else is saying no. I didn't set it up like that, but parents will reach out, and I encourage them to be strong advocates. And sometimes the special ed team doesn't like it. I may have to overrule and step in, because at the end of the day, it's what's good for kids, and so that's what we're all about. I think one of the things, if you drove by my old middle school, you'll see as they build the new middle school behind it, you'll see a big sign on the front of that school that says "Kids First," and that's what we should be about, and so that's what we're about.
So how do you view as the roles of the superintendent, the faculty, and the school committee in curriculum development and or innovation? And how have you responded to community pressure about curriculum?
Excellent question. We have a curriculum and assessment committee. It's a board committee. So, there are members from all the vested groups in terms of all stakeholders, and they're very much involved. And that's really how we go about our curriculum in terms of assessment and design. Obviously we have a first and a second read at the school board, which would be a school committee here, in terms of our curriculum. I can handle pressure. I think my currency is not popularity. It's not about being liked. It's about doing what's right. So, as we do what we need to do in terms of curriculum development, whether it's horizontal or whether it's vertical, we make sure that we do what's right for kids. Now, we have policies that help with that. If it's controversial material, we have policies and procedures that parents know the different avenues to take if there's particular curriculum that they're not comfortable with, or certain things that they want to opt out of. So we help facilitate that. So we don't get a lot of pressure in that regard, because that would typically with the pressure. We don't like this particular book, or we don't like this particular. Parents have the opportunity to opt out. We're also, I would say that the districts have been somewhat conservative in that approach, which has also not provided. It also helps with not getting a lot of pressure from the community in terms of curriculum. One of the areas, if I could, one of the areas is testing, which, how much is too much testing? So, we have a universal screening that we need to use, and, whether the state reports back in a timely fashion or not. I think there's that kind of pressure, because I think, my feeling was we need to test less and teach more. We need to have informative assessments that matter. That being said, we are data driven, so, making sure that we have the right assessments and making sure that we use them to help drive the work, or drive our instructional practices. I would say that there's more pressure in that regard than there is as opposed to the curriculum that we select. It's really about too much testing.
Any other audience questions? Any other school committee questions? Yes.
Follow up on what you just said. How do you select the assessments?
Again, we go through the curriculum and assessment committee. Our universal screening device, we wanted to find one that we felt aligned really well with what the state was using. The problem is the state changes so quickly. We decided that once we decided what we were going to use, we've stuck with it. There was SAT for high school kids because they were taking tests that didn't matter and they didn't think they were trying. So we've done a couple of different things, but I think for us, in terms of the assessments that we select, we make sure that they're ones that align as closely as they can with what the state's reporting on, and to give us predictable data in a timely fashion, so we can actually adjust the instructional strategies and practices that deliver on results.
Carlos, do you have?
Are you a finalist in another district? If so, what district would you choose if you're selected by both or others?
Well, what time is it? It's 8:30. I believe there's another district on the South Shore that will be announcing this evening. So I was a finalist in another district, and so I'm going to be perfectly honest. That's a family decision. I don't make decisions without talking to my wife and my children. So I can tell you that this is a district that I absolutely love and I've admired for many, many years. It's a tough question and for me to answer without actually talking to my family. And again, I haven't been offered another position, so I think it's a little premature. But I can tell you that this is a position that I want. This is a position that, I was very humbled and honored to even be part of the discussion, and humbled and honored to be part of this discussion. So, if I'm the right fit, this is certainly a place that would be given the utmost consideration, and I'd be very proud to be the superintendent of the Hingham Public Schools. I can tell you that.
Certainly honored that you threw your hat in the ring to apply for this position. We appreciate it. We know it's a very public process, so we appreciate you putting your name in there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I had a couple of closing questions. Tim stole one and Carol stole the other. So, so does anyone else in the audience have any questions for Dr. Metzler? Or
do you have any questions for us?
That's what I was just going. Liza stole my third question.
I really don't have anything left. No.
We've heard a lot from him, so the other reasons why I don't have any more questions, because I had a lot of time with him today. So.
Yeah, and I would say that's also a tribute to you and your process. I mean, you've been so informative all along. It's not a mystery. I know what's next. You know, and you know, I know it's a big responsibility. It's certainly a big decision. I know it's one that you trying to find the right fit is something that you may or may not struggle with. The only promises I can make to you is I'm honest, I'm loyal, I will work. No one will work harder, and no one will want it more than I do. So in the event that you take a chance on me, I won't let you down. I can promise you that.
Thank you very much. All right, well, seeing no other questions, we can conclude the interview. And again, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time out. Thank you for applying for the position. We certainly do appreciate it, and we wish you the best of luck, no matter what happens.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I would accept a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.